Hello, viewers, and welcome to yet another Warhammer 40,000 Conquest video production. My name is Mitch, and I am the Hive Tyrant. Today, I'm pleased to present a very special installment in my series of Community Spotlight videos, in which I have the opportunity to sit down and interview our recently crowned 2015 North American champion, Pierson Payne. Specifically, we discuss how he got involved in the game, his competitive background, his tournament preparation, and of course his deck composition. We chat about the entire 2015 championship experience as a whole, and he provides a wealth of knowledge, advice, and wisdom regarding the entire event. So, be sure to let me know what you think of this interview in the comments section below, and as always, I remain ever open to constructive criticism. But with our introduction aside, I'm honored to bring you an interview with our North American champion. Well, thank you very much for joining me today, but before we get into the heart of our interview, why don't you introduce yourself to our viewers and let us know how you've been involved in the Conquest community.
All right, my name is Pierson Payne. I guess recently I was the North American Nationals winner. Before that, I've been involved. I posted a few times on Card Game DB, but I guess I haven't really been super active on there until recently, trying to answer people's questions and things.
Sure.
I have a great community. Local community is mostly where I get my interactions. Yeah.
Awesome. Definitely an interesting experience becoming somewhat of an overnight celebrity, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I suppose, all in all, how long have you been playing Conquest? How long have you been involved in this game?
Right. I actually picked up the core sets of Conquest last year at Gen Con, so I guess I've been in it since the very beginning. Most of my group couldn't actually get started until they came out with the core sets in our local game store about November or so of last year. So I guess we've been in it since the very beginning.
Sure. Well, I suppose what was the initial appeal? Like, what made you look toward the game in the first place?
Yeah, definitely. We were playing Game of Thrones previous to that. I guess we just felt like that game was getting a little bit stale, and the idea of getting to be in on like the ground floor of an LCG where we didn't have to catch up with anything and we could be on the cutting edge of making the new Tier 1 decks and everything was probably the most appealing.
Definitely. I think FFG should probably consider a refresh of a Game of Thrones. It seems like it's about time for it. But do you have any history with like the 40K universe or anything like that?
Me personally, no. I had never played any type of Warhammer. I didn't know any of the lore or anything. Just when I played through the game originally, I just felt like it was so strategic and just such an amazing concept for a game. I really grew to like it.
Sure. Well, I suppose Conquest is definitely a unique game in that it's just got immense strategic depth, it's got a rich lore that it's all kind of built upon, but it allows the different players just this enormous wealth of different options, ranging from deck building to how you play your cards to what you do during command and combat. What are some of those mechanics that really made you stick with the game once you'd given it that initial Gen Con try?
Yeah, I think that the movement for the Warlords is just such an awesome amount of strategic depth to it. The fact that I just love the fact that in this game every decision matters and what order you do them in matters. Everything from deploying at command, waiting to play your command control units or being more obvious with your attacking units closer to planet one. It's just allows such an amount of strategy to this game that every game is so different. It's hard to put it down.
Well, definitely. And I suppose, congratulations once again on winning the recent North American Championship title. But when it came down to preparation for that tournament, figuring out what you were going to play, out of all the different options available to you, 7 factions, 14 different warlords, within that, a whole host of different options. Only a few of those setups are generally considered the absolute top tier, and you ended up winning, in what was well over 100-person tournament, and you chose Eldorath Starbane. So, what was it about the Eldar and Eldorath in particular that made you ultimately choose him?
I guess I got to give credit to my local play group here. When we knew I was after I had won the regional in Durham, and we decided that we were going to Gen Con, I had a lot of my friends and my player base back home that let me play a lot of games with a lot of different decks. I guess what in the end made the decision for me was the fact that it's just what I'd been playing the longest. It's what I won the Durham Regional with, and it's what I felt most comfortable with the strategies instead of trying to change last minute and practice for those.
Sure. I suppose, were there any other strong contenders? Any, that you were really considering?
Sure. I mean, I guess everybody probably considered Kith at one point or another. It's just when I played through it, and I just didn't feel quite as strong with my strategical reasoning and everything as I did with Eldrath.
Sure. Well, I suppose what are just some of Eldorath's strengths that kind of keeps you playing him in the first place? Is it just those control elements, or...
I personally think that he's the most. This game is so strategically in depth that flexibility, I think, is the strongest thing that any warlord can have in this game. And with his ability to be able to move around, his different amount, like all of his different events he can play, all the strong command presence he has, all the cheap units he has available to him, um, you can really stretch out your play in the deploy phase and in the combat phase to really get a good feel of what your opponent's trying to do and react to that previous to making your own decisions. And I think that's probably the best strength you can have.
Definitely, it kind of allows you a wealth of information by the time it, ultimately boils down to choosing what exactly you're going to do. Some of the denial components are particularly strong for sure. I suppose going into this tournament in the first place, what's your history in regard to competitive gaming?
Yeah. At first, I started off, I guess as probably a lot of us did, as a Magic player. I eventually became a level 2 judge for Magic, and then that game just fell really stale to me. I don't think that there's a huge strategy component. Obviously, a lot would argue. And then I guess and obviously the price of Magic, it's a little bit prohibitive. So
Definitely.
when my play group decided to switch over to Game of Thrones, we did that for a little while. I guess that's my history.
Sure. Well, I suppose it definitely makes a hell of a lot of sense to convert to the LCG model price-wise. Nowadays, I'll watch some videos and things, and it's just almost appalling when someone talks about, say, including up to 4 copies of a card that costs $60 or something in your deck.
Yeah.
Apart from just being like a judge at tournaments, have you won any previous championships or otherwise had a really good showing?
Actually, the Durham Regional was my first big tournament win, and this Nationals was my second big tournament win. So
Well, awesome, and definitely congratulations again. I think something everybody's probably wondering is how much preparation did you go through for this, big, grueling, enormous tournament that involves traveling to a different state and going up against, some of the best players throughout the world.
yeah. Well, my play group, we play weekly. We were lucky enough to be able to get a lot of the the kits, like the winter kit and the summer kit and everything. So we play for those about weekly or bi-weekly. I have probably 8 to 10 players that show up, and so I get a lot of chance to play a lot of different play styles, a lot of different people. they're all excellent. A few of them came with me. Didn't end up playing in the tournament, but I have no doubt that they probably could have done just about as well as I have. So I guess give a lot of credit to the fact that I have just such a great play group. So I'm playing with such great players every week.
That sounds absolutely awesome. I don't have any kind of local play group or meta, or I don't even happen to know a single other person that plays Conquest, so that sounds like an absolutely fantastic way to prepare in having, exemplary, very skilled players to constantly go up against. I suppose, how much refinement did your deck ultimately go through? Was it something you've been playing for a long time, or...
Eldorath has been my main warlord since the beginning of this game. But I guess there was a little bit of refinement going into after regionals was like kind of summing up, and we realized that it seemed Kith and Anshi were really going to be tremendous like threats in the game. It went through a little bit of refinement just because I felt like I needed some guys that could survive taking hits from chimeras and stuff. So
Right.
that really also with Kit's denial strategies and everything, I felt like I really needed to do a good command struggle showing, or it wasn't going to end well for me.
Definitely. I suppose, what kind of meta or what kind of opposition were you perhaps best prepared for?
Yeah, it's a funny story. Going into the nationals, the way I had changed my deck, I really thought I had a great matchup against Kith in particular. I thought that I had done well crafting my deck to counter the denial strategies and everything.
Definitely.
When I got into the tournament, I played Kith 3 times and lost horribly twice, so I wasn't right.
Well, certainly not what you were expecting, but
Yeah.
I suppose, since you mentioned that you felt as though you'd prepared for Packmaster Kith and Anshi, what matchups were you ultimately most afraid of? Like, in catering your deck specifically to compensate for some traditional areas of Eldar weakness, what were you maybe a little bit concerned you were leaving yourself vulnerable to?
The matchup I'm always the most scared of is Anshi. I don't know if this is necessarily a deck matchup problem or if it's just an unnatural fear that I have, but his ability just to be able to pop out of nowhere and just bloody my warlord, and there was never anything I could do about it. It's really, I've always, like, my hands are always shaking the second I even see that warlord. So...
Right, right. Well, I suppose you've been generous enough to provide me with an explicit deck list, so I suppose why don't we just kind of run through that, and you can talk a little bit about, what you do with each of these cards, maybe why you felt they merited inclusion in the first place, and then any special, like, tips or strategies or unusual methods of using those that most, not tournament winning players are necessarily privy to. But of course, your chosen warlord was Eldorath Starbane and his signature squad. Taking a look at your army units, you've got 3 Bealtan Guardians, which it's those 2 command icon 1 cost units. You just so rarely see those played nowadays. But what is a very curious choice of yours is you included 2 copies of the Eldar Survivalist. And it seems like that's kind of a little bit of a maligned card at the moment. What's your thought process there?
Yeah, it's just like I said, I think that the best way to win this game is through adaptability and through just gaining more resources, more card advantage, more resource advantage on your opponent. If you when you can stall out the command struggle a long time, those cards become infinitely more powerful because you can place them and place them on planets where maybe you think that your opponent's not really going to want to go, or you could even use them to try and influence your opponent to go to somewhere maybe you want them to go. And
Sure.
it's really about gaining that information and about that adaptability.
Kind of a little bit of subtle manipulation, it sounds like, as well.
Absolutely.
I suppose even, for that reason, even if you're not managing to accrue the extra card and resource, if you can kind of convince your opponent to commit favorably, that can also work out very well. How did those ultimately pan out to work for you over the course of the tournament?
They worked great. I think the best use of them so far was normally I had a pretty strong command presence after the first turn. A lot of times I would just wait until the second turn and deploy them on the new planet 5, and it was just by then it's just so hard for them to catch up, and it's so hard for them to want to commit their warlord all the way out to planet 5 or try and commit a lot of their unit power out to planet 5. That most all day they just left them alone and let me get the extra resources.
Sure, definitely makes a very, very difficult choice indeed. Do you want to answer that unit by stretching your forces unacceptably thin? So, well, very well done. I suppose up next you've got 3 copies of the Warlock Destructor. Any specific use for those that really tried to leverage in your favor?
I think that those are pretty standard. I guess the only thing that I would say about those is I like to play them out at the beginning of the deploy phase, or maybe the first or second play on the deploy phase. It really gives a good showing of the power that you're able to put forth on Planet 1, and a lot of times people don't even want to commit into that. Like I said, it really just narrows down my options as to where I think that they're going to try and commit their forces.
Sure. I suppose, is it often that you end up paying that resource cost to keep them around, or...
It really depends. A lot of games, I would get such a snowball rolling that I would just start on Planet 1 and just keep committing to planets until I had won. In that case, yeah, you end up paying it a lot if you think you're going to recommit to Planet 1. But if you don't really feel like you're going to recommit to Planet 1, it's probably not worth it. I think that majority of the day I did end up paying for it every turn, though.
Sure. Well, and up next, you've got a couple copies of Spirit Seer Aerithal, the unique Eldar unit that pulls damage off of units. What was your primary use for him?
Yeah, I think that's probably the most controversial part of my deck list. I think he's fallen. Doesn't really have a lot of favor. He's not a particularly great combat unit. But as we were talking about before, the 2 matchups I was the most scared of was Packmaster Kith and Anshi. So I really wanted a. Also, I don't really love matchups with Kato because Drop Pod Assault's really powerful. I just really wanted someone that I could deploy to another planet. Those 2 command hammers are great to stuff up command struggles, and he was also another nullify option in case I got hit with an Archon's Terror or a Kayun Strike or a Drop Pod Assault.
Well, I suppose, did you actually have much opportunity to use his ability over the course of the game, or was it primarily just kind of a decent combat unit with that nice command presence?
His ability to be able to play Nullify, actually, I don't believe it ever came up. But he did end up being a nice combat unit with 2 command hammers deploy at Planet 1 a few times. All of my opponents all day were fantastic, so none of them ever attacked any unit except him while he was at a planet. So his ability never came in particularly handy, but I do think that his ability was enough of a deterrent in attacking other people that it did its job.
Well, definitely. And of course, up next, you've got your 4 copies of the signature Starbane's Council. Any, unconventional uses for those that you like to employ?
Probably not unconventional. I do think that a lot of Eldar players I see play them out a little bit too quickly. I think that he's really a fantastic trump card. Great when you have initiative. I guess what I would suggest is just leaving them in your hand until about the time that you're really wanting to push to win a planet is probably the best advice.
Definitely, just so you can keep them around to deal out those enormous chunks of damage when you need it the very most. I suppose something that struck me as kind of interesting, maybe a little unique about your deck list, is you also happen to include just one copy of the Wild Rider Squadron. And I suppose, what was your thinking behind just the single copy?
Yeah, so in my deck list, I've really found, when I was trying to prepare, it was really about this Kith matchup. I really wanted as many low-cost units as I possibly could. That way I didn't want to get out command struggled by anyone. I think that Eldorath has a lot of very, very powerful attacking tools in his arsenal, but if you don't have the cards and resources to get to them, he's nowhere near as powerful. So winning those command struggles is probably the most important thing. But I do think that Wild Rider Squadron is a really fantastic offensive unit. It cost 4, so it's quite a lot on the resource curve, but I didn't want to just not include it because it's just such a powerful tool.
Well, definitely. And I suppose even with just the one copy, if you're playing a very command-savvy, command-powerful deck, you still stand a pretty reasonable chance of getting it by the time it can do some work for you. I suppose you also included 3 copies of the kind of somewhat divisive Slith Mercenaries, although it seems like a lot of people have come around to those. What's your, major impetus there? Like, what warranted their inclusion?
I think once again, I think that they provide such an opportunity for outplaying your opponent. When you can wait until, if you can stall the command phase long enough, they become just amazingly powerful. A 2/2 unit with 2 command hammers for 1 money that your opponent can't then steal if they've already passed in the deploy phase is just amazing. And sometimes it's really great to play them even when your opponent can steal them, because if you can get your opponent to spend their money, that once again it limits their options as what they're able to do during the combat phase, is what they're able to do further on in the deploy phase.
Right.
And if you can just provide, in this game that it's so adaptable, if you can constantly provide your opponent with lots of options, you provide them with more opportunities to make mistakes. And I think that they're a really great unit. I wasn't a huge fan of them for a long time, but I came around about the regionals time.
Sure. Well, and kind of another maybe controversial inclusion, although you happen to mention it was one of your answers to the meta, were 2 copies of the Hellion Gang. I suppose, what were you primarily concerned about when you chose to add those?
Yeah, those are because they can survive things that attack for 2. I don't have to shield them. They can survive getting hit with a Chimera. They can survive getting hit with a 2 attack unit from Anshi, and I don't need to use the shield. That's it's simple as that about those, really.
Sure, just some, they're not terribly expensive, but they've got some staying power, so they can definitely put in work. And of course, you've got 3 copies of Incubus Warrior, definitely respectable, 2 resources for 2 command icons, hit reasonably hard. Anything special to say about those?
Not particularly. I think that those are a pretty standard inclusion. It's really about the 2 command hammers on those guys.
Definitely. I suppose any just tips or suggestions on how to keep those safe so that 1 hit point doesn't just immediately prove their fruitless downfall?
I mean, they're so cheap. I wasn't really concerned with their safety. Once again, if somebody committed their warlord to start a battle on that planet, they probably weren't on planet 1, so I'm happy with that. Yeah, it's really just about the annoyance of constantly taking over. As soon as somebody plays like out a Void Pirate or a Rogue Trader, I can immediately take over that command struggle, and just constantly stuffing up those command struggles is really a great way, a stall tactic. It's a great way to gain advantage in the game.
Right. Well, and of course 3 copies of Bloodied Reavers, since you've allied with Dark Eldar. Extremely hard hitting unit, very affordable, seems fairly straightforward to me. And then those 3 Void Pirates and 3 Rogue Traders, I assume you were playing those kind of the same as a lot of your other command units, deploying them at a faraway planet where your opponent has to pick between, stretching themselves too thin or...
Yeah, absolutely. They're amazing. They cost one, so they're an amazing way to stall the deploy phase. Good strategies to keep in mind with those is if you have a rogue trader, a lot of times they're best to play on 2 card planets, or if you have a void pirate on 2 money planets, just to try and diversify your resources a little bit. If you have them on later turns, they're really great for 1 money. You can just play them on the newest planet that came up and really give your opponent headaches about deploying units there to try and stop those command struggle wins, or just to leave them alone and just let them keep picking up resources.
Definitely, and it's yet another, strong economic aspect of this deck to be certain. You've, moving on to your events, got 3 copies of Nullify. I suppose, is there anything in particular that you're most worried about when it comes to that card? Like you mentioned, Drop Pod Assault being a total headache. Any other events that you're really looking to wait for?
Yeah, I think that anything that messes up the battle math is probably the best target for Nullify. Things like Archon's Terror, Kayun Strike, Drop Pod Assault. But I definitely think that it's best to, anytime somebody plays an event, to take pause and just think about how that's going to affect the rest of the game. I used it over the course of the day. I used it on a tense negotiations after a Kayun Strike. So letting the Kayun Strike go through and then using it on the tense negotiations afterward. So it's really just, it's anything that you really think is going to, it's about taking pause for a second when events are played and really thinking about how they're going to affect the game. If you can deal with an event, it's best not to nullify it. But if it's going to really mess your game plan up, that's when you really want to save it for.
Well, definitely, it makes a lot of sense to hold on to your, most integral and useful, flexible tools until that moment where they're critically important, as opposed to just tossing them away at the earliest opportunity. Of course, you've got 2 copies of your signature Foresight. Any special use that you make out of that event?
I just think that that's probably one of the most incredibly powerful cards in this game. A big reason why I've loved Eldorath since the beginning. I think that those are best used in the first couple of turns to really shore up winning 4 at the least and possibly even 5 command struggles. Being able, just like, it goes along with the theme of this deck so well, being able to wait until your opponent has to make decisions and then you reacting to their decisions as opposed to them reacting to yours is a great strength of that deck.
Sure. You've also got 3 copies of the, often included Gift of Isha. I suppose any particular units that you're pulling back with that? I assume your warlocks and your councils.
I think that's pretty standard. It's got the 2 shields and warlock destructors, and the Starbane's councils are really great targets. I think it got a spirit seer a couple of times over the course of the day, but pretty standard.
Definitely. And of course, 2 copies of Empower. And you mentioned before the combat math being so critically important as to the outcome of battles. Any particular time when you feel like that's best played, or when that happened to make the biggest difference for you?
I don't actually think I cast that all day. I think that's mostly in there for the inclusion of the 2 hammers. Occasionally, if you have some extra money, occasionally you can get more value out of casting it than you can out of using it as a shield, but most of the day I was saving my money for Gift of Isha's, Archon's Terrors, and that was really there just for 2 shields.
Sure. Well, sounds reasonable to me. And then, of course, you've got 3 Archon's Terror. And I suppose, apart from just an opportunistic use of that, anything worth mentioning where, how would you try to get the absolute best use, like the most value out of that event?
I think once again that's another event it's powerful for everybody, but it's extra powerful in the hands of really great players because they know exactly how long they can go before they need to use it. They save it for the right moments. The most common mistake that I see made is if you have initiative, you can actually attack one of their units and get some damage on it previous to using the Archon's Terror, even if you always plan on using it. I think I just see some people not take enough really time to assess how the battle is going to go for a few seconds before they actually just cast it.
Definitely. I suppose, have you seen something like that happen in the context of a tournament, like in the heat of the moment where somebody makes kind of a little play mistake like that?
Oh, sure. I mean, everybody makes play mistakes, even even when you get to the top 8, the top 16 of nationals. I mean, these games are fraught with play mistakes, which is why it's such an amazing game. You really don't, there's really not much of a time when you see somebody play a perfect game because there's so many strategies to employ.
Sure. Well, I suppose I'll withhold my additional questions about the tournament format until in just a couple minutes. But with the events covered in regard to attachments, of course you've got your one copy of mobility. Any particular use for that card, like an ideal target perhaps, or a favorite way of using it?
Favorite way of using it's definitely for the 3 shields.
Sure. I definitely think that makes a lot of sense there. And then promotion, also fairly straightforward. I assume you'd be playing that to one of those faraway planets?
It just depends. It's another, the deck's really all about this deploy phase, just delay, and putting it onto units just to see how your opponent will react to it. Maybe they'll play their own promotion, or maybe they'll commit more units to that planet. It really just is about this adaptability to the deck to try and draw out what your opponent's plans are previous to you making your own.
Well, definitely. And then I suppose the very last card included within the deck is the Aleatok Shrine. And anything worth mentioning about that? Like, it's not necessarily always the most useful support. Do you often play it, or how do you make use of that card?
I think the most often, when I play that, the most often it's because I've started this snowball effect I was referring to earlier, where you have these very powerful units like Starbane's Council or Warlock Destructors that continue to come home from First Planet.
Right.
And if you can bring them into battles readied, it's very, very difficult for your opponent to then come back and win those battles.
Sure. I mean, definitely stacked with Eldorath's ability, it makes for a lot of action discrepancy between the two players if you tap out one of their units and ready one of your own. I suppose, with that said, just any general strategy about the deck as a whole that you've yet to mention?
I don't believe so. I think just for anybody trying to put this deck together and play, it'll take a lot of practice I would say, take a lot of time to think about exactly what your opponent's plays mean. If they're playing a unit to a specific planet, or if anything seems strange to you, really take the time to assess why you think they would do that. Or you can often garner information like how many attacking units that you think they have, or if they have one of these power cards that you're waiting for a lot, like maybe they're saving money for their Kyvex War Leader, or maybe the Anyi Prelight, or maybe they have an Archon's Terror. A lot of times they'll foreshadow their plans based on where they're committing their command struggle units. Maybe they feel it's important to get some money that turn or some cards. And you can really gain a lot of information as to what you need to lock down about the planets or about the combats based on the decisions that they're making, if you're making all of your decisions after they're making their decisions.
Well, definitely. It seems like, throughout this video, you've just been really driving home that point to try and get as much information out of your opponent as possible before you finally have to kind of show your own hand. I suppose just all together, what exactly was this big tournament like? You mentioned your regional performance before, but I'd imagine ever so slightly more people showed up to this one. But what were some of the high points? What were some of the low points? Kind of walk us through the entire experience.
Yeah, I think I really didn't know what to expect coming and playing in this nationals. The game's really young. It's obviously only a year old, so I didn't know if there was going to be a lot of people just showing up because they were at Gen Con, or if there was going to be a lot of people coming specifically for this tournament.
Right.
I really the caliber of player that I played all day was surprisingly high. Not because I'm thinking that most people are not good at the game, but it's just mostly because from my local metas and stuff, everybody that I played in nationals, I think could have made the top 16, maybe even won the tournament. I didn't have an easy matchup all day.
Wow.
Which was really it was great. It was great to see such a high level of play at the tournament. Also, everybody was very cordial and very nice all day. I didn't run into one person that made the day encumbering at all, or made me feel bad about anything that had happened. A lot of people were just really, really fantastic. I think this game's got a really great community going so far.
Well, that's absolutely fantastic to hear. I've mentioned it a few times before, but I've just been nothing but surprised as a relative newcomer to this game that the community has been so open and inviting. And just judging by how skillful some of the members of this online community are, it's, equally intriguing and kind of exciting that it seems like this community is built from so many intelligent, skillful individuals. What was kind of the basic format of the tournament? I know you played, I think, a grand total of 7 games. That had to be a little bit of an endeavor in endurance there, but were you under like a time limitation, or how did that function?
Yeah. So the way the nationals tournament overall was played was there was 7 rounds of a Swiss tournament, and then the top 16 players from that 7 rounds got cut to do a single elimination tournament. So I guess that's a grand total of 11 games.
Okay,
I had a bye from the Durham regional, so I didn't actually play round one. So I guess I played 10 games all day.
sure.
In those rounds, you have I believe it was 50 or 55 minutes to complete the round, or it went to time for modified wins and losses.
Right. Well, it definitely sounds like an enormous amount of stress, going up against just such incredibly skillful opposition for that many straight games in a row. Were there any opportunities for you to really take a break or take a breather, or was it just kind of one long, exhaustive grind?
Well, there was no lunch break or anything else like that. Which I was okay with because it was already going to be such a long day. I guess the breathers came in if you got done. A lot of times, games of Conquest don't last nearly 55 minutes.
Sure.
So if you get your game done in 20 or 25 minutes, you have a good half hour to sit down and take a breather. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad because you stay so nervous, especially when you're getting later and later in the tournament.
Definitely. I suppose, what were some of the most memorable aspects? Like, during some of those matches, what were some of the highlights, some of the low points? I would imagine you didn't go into the tournament expecting to, take home the trophy, but how did the actual, competition pan out?
Yeah, what I was the most happy with was seeing such a diverse field at nationals. In almost every competitive game I've ever seen, you shake out with this very small amount of top tier, tier 1 decks that end up being 75 or 80% of the field, and then you have another 15% that's these tier 2 decks, and everything trails off after that. But I think that just about every faction was pretty well represented at the tournament, and I didn't see a whole lot of over-representation of one warlord either. So a lot of the competition shook out pretty great. There was a very, very nicely diverse field.
Definitely. I know a lot of people personally were cheering that there wasn't a Space Marines victory, so that was
Yeah.
very nice to see. I think a Nosdrag deck ended up making top 8. Of course, it was a filthy Xeno that ended up winning everything, so absolutely fantastic. I suppose in the entire course of the game, what do you feel was maybe your most memorable moment, or your most, what matchup maybe really stood out to you? What was the most special game?
My suppose special moment of the tournament wasn't actually a game. I'll give a quick praise and shout out to one of the people in our community. When we were going into top 16, I was paired against a person who had beaten me early in the tournament by the name of Ornitov, and I wasn't feeling particularly happy about being paired up with him again, but one great thing I saw happen, there was actually a software glitch going into top 16 that reversed place 16 and place 17.
Okay.
So somebody who had already been told they were in the top 16 and had sat down and everything was then going to be switched with somebody else and told that they then couldn't play. Ornitov actually gave up his spot in the top 16 so that this guy could play, and I think that's probably the classiest move I have seen at a tournament ever.
That's definitely a gentlemanly thing to do right there. Fantastic opportunity for some nerd rage. So awesome to see somebody put themselves out there like that.
Definitely.
I suppose something I was wondering is, over the course of the tournament, I would imagine that everybody could still stand to learn at least something from this game. Did you kind of have any learning experience, or was there anything new for you playing against, at least theoretically, increasingly daunting opposition?
Oh, absolutely. I think I've made a new mistake and learned a new thing every matchup. Currently, my meta doesn't have any chaos players in it, so I really, going into, I believe, top 16, I played an awesome chaos player playing Zarthar, and he pretty much taught me all the tricks to that deck pretty well. That's a very powerful deck. I think is at least nearing tier 1. Besides that, it's such a long day. It's hard to pick out individual play mistakes or individual things that I've really
Oh, sure.
learned over the course of individual games. But yeah, definitely. I mean, every last one of my opponents, especially getting into the top, especially after we got into the top 16, all of those games could have gone either way. Nobody was perfect. Everybody made mistakes, and I think that there was even times I was getting outplayed, and maybe my deck just pulled it out for me.
Well,
But
sounds like an all-around amazing experience. I suppose any advice for players looking to make more of a tournament presence, maybe to get involved in the tournament scene or to become more competitive, any words of wisdom?
yeah, a few things. I think that the best way anyone can start getting involved in a tournament scene is you have to play a lot of games, and not only do you have to play a lot of games, you have to play them against good players. Um, if you don't have a local tournament scene, maybe get involved on Octagon. But I think what you really could do is go to local game stores and just sit down the game, demo it with people. Just try and get yourself a player base. If you already have a player base, try and make sure everybody in your player base feels included, welcome. Try and get their skill level up. It's going to only help you in the end. Try a lot of different decks. Analyze why the standard decks are the way that they are. And I just really think that also when you play games, don't just play through them over and over and over again. Really think why you're making the decisions you're making. Why is your opponent making the decisions they're making? This game is so deeply strategic, as we've talked about before. Analysis during the games is really the best way to improve your play skill.
Well, as we kind of wind things down in this interview, and once again I thank you sincerely for your time today, anything else you'd like to share kind of about the tournament experience or any other just thoughts, advice you'd like to toss out there?
I think this is a fantastic game. I believe that we have a great player base going. I think that as long as we all continue to uh, grow our player bases and keep such a friendly, inclusive community online, it's going to keep growing. And I have no doubt that this could be definitely one of Fantasy Flight's most successful games. And I look forward to playing more people in the future.
Well, sounds absolutely fantastic to me. So I suppose I'll just end things by asking, what's next up for you? Are you going to be participating in Worlds, or what are you up to next?
Yeah, I'm not. I haven't actually made my decision on that. It's a very, very long car ride, or in a very expensive plane flight. I have school coming up next semester, so I would really like to go. It'll probably depend on if I can convince any of my friends to come with me.
Sure. Certainly would make the entire experience a lot more bearable. So, I suppose with that said, I'll just wrap things up by saying thank you, Pierson, so much for your time today. I very much appreciate your coming on, and I thank you for the interview.
Thank you. I had a great time.
All right. Take care, good sir.
You too.
Well, with our interview having come to a close, I'll just conclude this video by saying thank you once again for watching, and I very much hope you enjoyed this very special discussion today. Please leave a comment sharing your own thoughts and opinion regarding not just this interview or Pierson's deck list, but also your own experiences when it comes to tournament play. Interaction with viewers like you is quite sincerely the absolute highlight of my creating content for this channel, and I'm honored to have had the opportunity to share with you this interview today. So, with that said, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you've not already done so. Please feel free to contact me directly and keep in touch through any form of social media you'd like, but in any case, thank you once again for watching, and as always, be sure to check back in again soon for ever more Conquest LCG content to come.